Hey everybody, it is Calxiyn here, and if you all enjoy this video, remember to subscribe for more Shadows House videos. Today I am going to be doing my reaction highlights and my discussion to episode 10. If you guys don't know, all my full-length reactions are up on Patreon, and for YouTube membership members, they are like subtitle and timer reactions. You have to sync up, so you press play when I press play, that type of thing. And so if you pledge now, you can actually see not just the episode 10 reaction, but also all of my other ones for the same price on Patreon. And so I think that's pretty good. That's like $1 a full-length reaction, basically. So I'm just saying. But if you're fine with the reaction highlights and the discussion, we'll just get into that. And thank you to the patrons and the YouTube membership members for making videos like this possible. And without further ado, why don't we just get into it? Let's go. Oh, Emilicio is so smart. Oh my god, that's a lot of blood! No, she's not scratched, I don't think it's even scratched! She, like, cracked her head open, is she gonna be okay? Oh shit, they're running out of time, bro. Tick-tock! Let's go! Oh my god, 10 minutes? Run! Oh my god, what if they put the cart in the water and, like, swim, like the current? You know what I mean? Oh my god, the bell's ringing! That must mean Ricky got through! Ricky or Rum! But we haven't heard a fourth bell yet. You know what I mean? Like, we only heard 3, not 4. No! No! Ride the waves! Oh, you guys can do it! Ride the waves! Go down the river! Because remember, there was a waterway before. Ooh! Oh, I like how Barbie's doll is like it's not too late yet. Well, what if they don't run? What if they swim? Fuck you, we're Starbearers, okay? You can eat shit. Yes! I look once more, just around the riverbed beyond the shore. Let's go! I love it here. Oh, right! He didn't know, because she's been hiding it the whole time. Oh, yeah, you don't give up, Kate, so I wouldn't give up either. But what about Shirley and Rum? Oh, John got through. Right, where are Rum and Shirley? Where are they? Oh, see, she knows that, but how does she know? Oh, from the very start, that's what Kate wanted. But why? What does she know? She must know things. That was my theory from before. Her secrets. What if she had a doll before and that's how she knew? Or maybe she's like reincarnated. Those were my theories from the very beginning of the show. Hey! Whoa! That's so cool! She's an angel! She's a demon! Look at them! They're just like, what? But what happened to Shirley and Rum? No! But I don't think we heard another bell! What happened? No! They were the last to arrive? What about Shirley and Rum? What happened? Oh no! Does that mean they failed? No! Oh! No, she gave it to her because she's been there all along, right? Right? Oh, why? Oh! Why? What's wrong with her? What's gonna happen now? Why was she... Oh. What? What happened to her? Why? Why is she disappearing? Why? we'll focus on this. Don't drink it! Oh, that was sus. There's something sus. Oh, God! You won't be able to get enough? I don't like that. That sounds like brainwashing juice. Oh, it's Rose and Rosemary. Oh, Mary Rose. Oh, she sounds like Butch, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? She sounds gay. Why am I like this? Let's go, lesbians, let's go. How are we just supposed to focus? Yeah, see, so she's commenting on it too. Oh. Isn't Emilicio wondering what happened to Rum? When are they going to realize? No! What if she's not, though? What if she doesn't realize because she drank the coffee, and then the coffee... No! Oh, he's sad too! I think Ricky's sad, he's just hiding it. No! Even John is thinking. Oh no! See? They're all, no, they're not sad and covering it up. They all have like a glazed expression because of the coffee. They're not thinking anymore. Something's wrong. Oh, John just sent her a note. Shit's whack. No, 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 no. Oh no, I'm so scared. Yeah, see, all the dolls are glazed over. Oh, geez. Just his hand, and they're all... the cult. The cult, sis. Kate doesn't look very impressed. Wow, of all this evil! Kate knows everything. See, even Emilicio's not acting normal. They must realize that their dolls aren't acting normal. Uh-oh. Is Edward in trouble? Parasitic fairy? Oh my God! That's what was in the first episode! So that's what happened to Shirley? No! I don't believe that! No, I don't believe it! I thought that Shirley would have been the strongest one of all. I don't believe that she withered and was weak. No. Right, that erases their memory. But they won't be like that forever, right? But she has a great memory. No. Edward! I don't like this. I'm scared. I don't want Rum to be repurposed into a veil doll. Is that good? Oh, Ryan! Oh, then the next generation, so he'll keep doing the debuts? Is Emilicio still not good? Oh no, they're still mind controlled, I think. Oh no! How do you fix this? Oh my gosh, when is this coffee gonna leave their system? Oh no, it can't be like this forever! Okay. Alright, Alright everybody, let us get into the discussion now. Now, I don't even know how to feel right now. Like, this show, something that it does a great job doing is emotional whiplash. Like, in one scene, you have Sarah basically abusing Mia, and then it keeps cutting back to Emilicio being, like, all happy and bubbly about wanting to be a Starbearer in her dreams. And similarly, okay, you have this big celebration going on, and then you have Rum and Shirley, like, in emotional turmoil. Shirley just dies in front of our faces, and so with that in mind, I'm not really sure how to feel right now, and I think that that's kind of the point. Like, I think that that's just the point of those moments, and like this episode in general, I think that it is defined by you should not know how you feel right now, because on one hand, are you happy that they passed the debut, because that's been the obstacle for the last like 5 episodes? Yes, but now that you see what's on the other side of the debut, you're like, oh no. And so that's basically how I feel right now. And after I watched it, I went into my Discord and I was just like, what the fuck, right? And I was just like, what the fuck was that? And somebody was like, oh no, like they didn't do Promise Neverland again, did they? Because everybody knows that, like, I had really big issues with Promise Neverland Season 2, so that's what everybody first thought, and I was like, no, it is not what the fuck in, like, a bad way. It's like when a story does something bad, like, bad, but the writing is, like, so good, you know what I mean? And so that's really how I felt after watching this episode, but let's just get into it. So we have Kate, basically talking about the event that happened at the very end of last episode, which was obviously them falling through the sky. So she says, she cleared a large area of thorn trees so we'd have somewhere to land. And then we see obviously the remnants of the crate and just like the overall like not necessarily structure, but how do you say it, like the forest is in this like very nice curve, then you have the cart, then you have the crane, kind of showing like Emilicio's thought process. Then she placed her push cart full of flowers and leaves there as a cushion, right? So it's like, oh my gosh, Emilicio did this and I didn't even notice, right? Only when looking at it from this angle does Kate really see what she was doing. And then you have obviously all the flowers and the grass and the leaves. And so I guess this is also to explain why they didn't have like that bad of injuries, right? It's like, oh, well, it was full of grass. It's like jumping in a hay bale, I guess, but I've never done that, and so I don't know if that's true. Did she plan this from the start in case she couldn't operate the crane, right? So Emilicio is like big brain, you know? She always has like a backup plan, and I really like this. Is there anything she doesn't think of? And again, this could be kind of that like farm girl nature that I keep talking about, this whole like, you know, theory that I have that Emilicio is really human and may have been from like a lower or working class compared to dolls like Mia that could read from birth. And so I feel like that, like these seem like traits that you would kind of learn on a farm or something like that, like to have all these backup plans, you know, like especially if you're working with like animals or something like that where things can be unexpected. Like Emilicio kind of always plans for the unexpected and thinks outside of the box. Like I feel like that's very necessary. So I don't know, maybe I'm just ascribing like traits that are very vague to fit in with my theory, you know what I mean? Like it could be my theory bias, but like the fact that she thinks this much, like you would have to say like, oh, well, compared to some of the other characters, like she definitely may have been in a position where she was more like somebody who had to do actual labor. And again, in this episode, they point out like, yeah, my body is sturdy, right, from all those years of hard work. And so it's like, if you're like a sheltered aristocrat, sure, you're able to learn how to read, but you may not necessarily be able to think fast on your feet or outside of the box like Emilicio does. So I would say that's more evidence to like something labor intensive, right? Something where you're not just like, you know, studying all day, I guess, and nothing wrong with that, but you know, there's a difference between characters like Mia that are a bit more seemingly like book smart, right? And then Emilicio who like has all these plans. And so then this was the first like horrifying shot. So you have Emilicio smiling at you, right? And then you just see the blood trickle from her face. And so again, it hasn't outright been stated yet, but dolls don't bleed. Dolls don't need food. And so clearly, in my opinion, this is pointing to, again, the fact that they are human. Because even Lord Grandfather in this episode, while they're kind of like revealing the secrets, right? Like the big secret that they're fairies and stuff, like they didn't even talk about like, oh, they don't call them humans, they just call them dolls, I'm pretty sure. Or to best mimic the human form, but they still refer to them as dolls, right? They're not like, oh yeah, like we go down in the town and steal people's kids, right? But that has been my theory since like basically day one, like episode episode 1 or 2 was like, oh, they're stealing these people's children. And in fairy tales, like, that is a very common thing for, like, fairies to basically, like, take children and, like, leave something else in their place and stuff. Like, there's a bunch of fairy tales that involve fairies specifically and, like, children. And I don't know all of them off the top of my head. I did take a fairy tales class in university, like, for one of my English minor credits, but we didn't necessarily go into, like, everything that deep. It was a bit more general, and I don't think we looked at any fairy stories except for Peter Pan. So I'm not sure, but I think that, like, fairies association with kids and that they call themselves fairies in this episode, that could definitely be something to look into. And so, yeah, like, they're stolen humans. At this point, like, there's no way that you can tell me that they're not. And so she scratched her face, but I'm like, how? You know what I mean? Just because, like, I didn't see her get hit anywhere, or maybe they, like, knocked heads as they were falling. I mean, obviously, like, they had a fall, right? And so why is this reminding me of, like the Humpty Dumpty nursery rhyme? Like, she fell and, like, cracked her head. Anyway, this is, like, so off topic, but when I was a kid, I ran into the door of a washing machine, and so you guys probably won't be able to see it, but see that shiny thing right there? I cracked my head open. So anyway, so I definitely relate, but this is, I think, on her head, she said, and so it's not like on her face, it's just on her, like, head, so maybe more over here, so it's probably not noticeable, and they have bangs anyway, so, like, no one will ever notice. It's fine. It's just a little cut on your head. It's not very deep. And what if, okay, so this is, like, totally, like, kind of a crack theory, or, like, just a weird thing, but, like, what if she didn't get hurt from that incident, but what if she had already been hurt in the past, and, like, falling from that height just, like, I don't know, like, jiggled something up, I guess, if that makes sense, because I'm assuming they may have stitches. I don't know what time period we're supposed to be in, but you know what I mean? Like, have you ever had an injury and then you do something, and even though, like, you don't necessarily injure that part of your body, like, that part of your body that was injured the first time kind of, like, gets re-injured again? So I'm kind of imagining, like, what if she cracked her head open as a human, and then that just kind of, like, came loose, you know what I mean? But anyway, I don't think that's how that works. My crack in my head has never come loose. But anyway, that was just something random that I was thinking. And then she says, yeah, I really am a sturdy doll. And again, they're trying to point out how, like, sturdy she is, right? And so I'm like, okay, well, again, like, compared to, like, a fragile, like, noble child who doesn't need to do any labor, it would make a lot of sense if Emilico's, like, upbringing had something to do with, again, like, that farming type of thing where you're, like, you're sturdy, you got muscle, right? You're, I don't know how to say it, but, like, have you guys seen this? I don't remember what it was, but I remember I was watching a movie once. This is just like Calxiyn, the ADHD Shadows House special. I've gone on so many tangents already, and this is gonna be so, like, long of an episode. But anyway, I remember watching something, and I don't know what it was, and then they, like, looked at the character's hands, and they were like, well, you can't fucking fool me, okay? Those are hands that haven't seen labor a day in their life. Like, you know what I mean? As opposed to having, like, blisters and stuff. I don't remember what it was. Maybe it was an anime, but it was basically like some upper class guy was just pretending, and they were like, no, you haven't seen work in your life, honey, nice try, because, like, your hands aren't gruff like ours. Anyway, but what about you, Mistress Kate? You're not hurt. And so what's really interesting is I wonder if they can feel pain, just because, well, now we know that they're kind of like fairies, right? And so it doesn't seem like they'll feel pain in, like, the usual sense, but again, we did see Shirley die, but that seemed to be unrelated. Like, it seems like they're kind of like spirits that don't have, like, physical, I don't know how to explain it, because obviously Kate has a physical form, or she's maintaining a physical form, but you know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of weird all around, like, what exactly they are, and so I don't know if they would necessarily feel pain from, like, fall damage and stuff, because I think that, like, it was left kind of vague, because she was like, if I do this, all, right, like, if I fall, all, but then all was cut off, and so you could think, like, oh, she's, if she falls, she'll die, but some people pointed out to me that there was also the concern if she fell into the thorns that her clothes would have gotten torn up, and so maybe, like, they don't even experience pain, or, well, here's the thing about not experiencing, like, pain or death. My question is that I had this big theory that, like, Lord Grandfather needed a successor, or would be, like, usurped or something, and so there must be a way to get rid of them if, like, that was the whole thing, because in this episode they do say, like, oh, you know, like, they're planning to get rid of you or overthrow Lord Grandfather. I think Ryan is saying that about the other third floor lords, which is very interesting. He's saying something like that, like, you don't see it, Lord Grandfather, but, you know, they're trying to usurp you or something. He says something along those lines. And so how is that gonna happen? Like, there must be a way for, I guess, shadows to kill other shadows and harm them, but it may be soot power, not necessarily like fall damage or stuff that would hurt a normal human. That's sort of what I'm thinking at the moment. And so then we see the soot hourglass, obviously, only 10 minutes left, and so they're all basically just talking like, oh, you know, they still have a long road ahead, and then we just cut back to them. So they're just all kind of like, they're probably not gonna make it. They don't seem so, like, concerned or, like, panicked or anything. They're just kind of like, they're not gonna make it, right? But then we see Kate and Emilicio, and I feel like showing that to us wasn't even necessarily for the nobles' reaction, because, like, they really don't give a shit. Like, they wanted to kind of see them fail, right? But I feel like it was for us as the audience to know that they were super far away, like, how far away they are. So I feel like it wasn't even, like, for the nobles' reaction. It was to tell us, like, hey, audience member, this is how far away they are. They still have to get all the way over there. And that basically contextualizes Kate's actions, because, you know, she's kind of slowing down and just taking care of her, and Emilicio notices right here, like, oh, you're doing this because you think that these are our final moments together. You think that there's no hope in winning anymore. And so you see the wind blows here, and again, I talked about the wind blowing as, like, kind of a emotion signal, and, like, before it was love, obviously this is kind of something else. And so she's like, don't tell me it's too late, right? And so she realizes that the only reason why Kate is not making haste is because she is already defeated. Like, Kate has thought that she is already defeated, that there's no way that they can do this, right? You've been true to who you are. It's apparent from the way Patrick acted, right? And so she's basically saying, like, listen, like, even though that we failed, you have been true to who you were the entire way. That's all Kate needs to be content. And that's interesting because Kate later talks about the fact that she wanted Emilicio to be a unique individual instead of just being her face or her doll. And so I wonder if she's basically saying, hey, if we fail, I got what I wanted because you were true to yourself the entire time. Now, we should talk about Kate's motivation, because a theory I had way back in episode 1 or 2 or 3, when did she accidentally use the toy as, like, a what do you call it, a, like, wipe? She basically, like, used it by accident to clean up a spill. I had a theory that Kate had a doll before, and she had lost the doll somehow, and she remembered everything. That was my theory. And so with Emilicio, my whole thing is that she was basically, like, she was knowledgeable about what was going on, about the fact that they're really human, possibly. I don't know about that far, but maybe the true intentions of the house. Maybe she got that far to realize the true intentions of the house, what was going on, and for some reason her doll was either, like, punished or destroyed, and then maybe she got turned back into, like, a morph thingy. But she retained her memory, I guess, and then, like, basically, like, bonded to a new doll again, like, covertly, like, under Lord Grandfather's nose, maybe. I don't know, maybe it's kind of like a reincarnation type thing. And so my theory was that she had another doll, and that doll made her toy. But that's the thing, is she has the toy. And so, like, wouldn't the house need to know about this? Or else they'd be like, okay, Kate, you get a second chance, here's all the shit from your old room, right? And so there are some, like, things that I definitely need to think out more, but that was basically my idea. Is that Kate had already had a doll, she's been through all this before, and for some reason she had to start over, right? Whether that was, maybe it was like one of those third floor nobles that are, like, you know, being tricky and stuff, like, who knows why, right? Like, maybe one of them, even though Kate was technically, like, on paper destroyed or something, she got to remorph, and now they're, like, infiltrating, right? My whole thing from the very beginning is that Kate wanted to basically, like, prime Emilicio to take down the system, and she does say later, like, oh, like, I know, like, the truth about this evil house or something, or like, he's the root of the evil, talking about Lord Grandfather. And so that tells me that Kate definitely knows more than we think that she does. And so I think that my theory about her maybe having a life before, and then maybe, like, because think about it, okay? Like, how do the morphs get made in the first place, or like let loose? Like, could it be possible that there's like a co-conspirator, like, working with Kate, basically? You know, like, if there's somebody also conspiring, and so even though Kate was punished and maybe her doll was made into a veil doll, something like that, like, Kate was put back into the system and she retained everything from her past life. I don't know. That's sort of what I'm thinking, is that Kate will keep, like, morphing with new dolls until she can find, like, the perfect doll to pass the debut, right? And so she's just proud of Emilicio in this moment. She's like, that's all I needed to be content, is, you know, like, this, like, final moment with you and you being true to yourself all along, because I feel like that it could be like, oh, if these are our final moments together, that's, you know, like, I'm glad, like, that you got to maintain being you the entire way, but it could also be, I'm glad that, you know, you retained you being you, because that means next time when I try this again, I can take the information back with my next doll. I don't know. So it could be like a little bit of a double thing. But anyway, and so we have Edward over here, or I guess Ed and Edward. Not everything went as planned, but I succeeded in the end, right? Because he thinks it's over. He's like, okay, well, I failed too. I've done my job, right? But while he's walking down the garden, you actually see Barbie and her doll over here. But let's talk about him first. This debut marks a major step for me. And so obviously, we see, like, the incident in the debut hall again. The dolls were tougher than I thought. I did foresee the blossoming of John's power, right? And so, again, I feel like that's why they put him and Ricky in the crate, even though, we talked about this before, all the dolls were, like, held in different ways, if that makes sense. Like, all of them were supposed to get, like, different traps. The trap for Ricky was the box, or Patrick, I should say. The trap for Patrick was the box. The trap for John was the fact that he knew that he would explode the box and his clothes were dirty. So I talked about that the box was never the real trap. It was the soot from John exploding, because he had foreseen that. So I feel like I got that right, and I'm really happy about that. So then we have this scene with Barbie and her Shadow Master, and the interesting thing about this is that I feel like that there's something going on with Barbie that I don't quite understand, because before they were kind of talking about, like, oh, when you wear this, you know, dolls aren't supposed to talk, you're supposed to be just a face, right? They say that in this episode, and then also obviously we have known that for a couple episodes now, right? But they say that again to Kate when she enters in, like, the hall, the victory hall. But the thing about Barbie is, it's like, is that her facial expression? Like, is she mimicking her? Because, like, she was very, like, soft spoken in a way. Like, I'll have to not show you guys, but I'll have to point out where I thought she was being more, like, soft in her voice and everything. But she's a lot less aggressive than Barbie is, and so I feel like this facial expression doesn't necessarily match what she's saying, because she's, like, a bit hasty, perhaps, right? Like, I feel like that she's a bit more of a soft-spoken know-it-all that could kill you, whereas Barbie is, like, aggressive and could kill you. Does that make sense? Like, in terms of character archetypes, there is silent but deadly, then there's aggressive but deadly. And so I feel like that she's more the silent but deadly type, and so I don't feel like this face is matching for me. But y'all let me know what you think, just because I feel like that she hasn't really been matching with her the entire time that we've seen her out, but that's just my opinion. The soot glass has not run out yet. It would take me over 10 minutes from that point, and I know the way, right? So he's basically saying, you know, with me and my soot power, and if I ran, it would take me over 10 minutes, and I know where I'm going. There's no way. It's physically impossible, no matter how fast they run. The writing is on the wall. You kids need but to do as I say. I feel like this expression is definitely matching. Like, I'm looking at them now and I'm like, okay, yes, like, that definitely makes sense. Then do as you please, right? And so, you know, she's just like, okay, well, whatever. I think that was her talking. She was like, okay, well, then do as you please. And so it's very interesting that they came over here to stop him, because I guess, like, as Starbearers, they're kind of helping. Like, they are there to greet the dolls anyway. So I'm assuming what happened is, like, this is connected to the greeting courtyard, and so she basically saw him closing the gate, like the gate that they would come through for the, like, you know, they would come through the gate and then they would be celebrated by the veiled dolls, right? So I'm assuming that she saw him closing the gate and she was like, well, what the fuck are you doing? Okay, like, it's not over yet, you know, there's still 10 minutes, because I feel like she's probably very much a stickler for the rules, and so I'm assuming that's what happened. And so then, you know, he hears a noise, and I love this. So the bird flies out the window, but I feel like that this wasn't actually like the nobles, like the third floor nobles told him, right, to send this message. I feel like that this was actually Allie trying to warn him. So this wasn't even like, oh, you know, can you send another message to Edward? I want to hear him play the piano, right? Like, we've got it in past episodes. This was Allie being like, bro, you better watch out because look at the upper level, bro. You know what I mean? Is that was his friend, right? The pink-haired doll was trying to warn him and give him a warning. It wasn't like the third floor lords told him to look. It was, she was like, shit, bro, you gotta check this out. You know, that's how I imagine, right? And so that's, yeah, what's Allie talking about, right? And so it's like Allie was trying to warn him. And so I think that that's really interesting. It's all going as planned. It's all going as planned. And I'm like, oh, Edward. I do feel bad for Edward, though, because I did have this theory last week that he's not really a bad guy. He's just desperate to basically like rise up in the ranks, get on the third floor so he can make a better world where dolls and shadows do not like necessarily have to like overwrite, if that makes sense, where the shadow does not have to overwrite the doll. Instead, where dolls and shadows can like work in harmony, basically. And so that's what I was thinking, like that's my theory for his like better world. And given how like his doll and his shadow and like his friends' dolls and shadows, they seem to be coexistent rather than like full takeover. Whether or not the third floor lords know that, I'm not entirely sure. But I felt like that was sort of the whole thing in the first place, and so I think that, like, Edward is kind of just misunderstood, and I feel like that in his mind, he's like, okay, well, you know, I can sacrifice a couple kids to free all of the kids, right? That's how he sees it, like, the ends justify the means, so he may not be, like, a truly bad guy after all. So he says, I have the whole ending planned, and this one, I'm not sure. Seeing this again, they seem so ordinary, yet the information is flawless. So before, I thought that they were talking about Shirley, but it seems like that they were talking about Kate and Emilicio. And so they say it's as if they know they're being watched. And so I think that basically what they meant about this, like what Ed was saying is like, you know, like we haven't like seen any soot emission from Kate. It's like she knows that she's being watched, right? And she did think that like it could be a bad thing for them to reveal this information. And Kate seemed to be like, you know, Emilicio, don't tell anyone about this yet because I don't know whether or not like we're supposed to do this, basically. Like that was the vibe. But now I'm thinking that Kate knows more than she's let on, and so she was just saying that to Emilicio, but really she knew in order to like remain covert and like, you know, basically I don't know how to explain it, but to maintain like, oh yeah, like I'm just you know, a morph fairy, I guess. Like, I'm just a fairy that has never had a doll before. Like, I'm kind of suspicious of that now. Like, I think that she has, and so that's why she kind of hid her power in the first place. It wasn't, like, new to her or anything at all, right? Maybe it kind of was in the sense, like, this new form that she took brought on new powers, but, like, her soul or her essence could have been powerful the entire time. I don't know how to explain it, but you know what I mean? It's like that she didn't necessarily, like, carry over the same powers with her if she did kind of like reincarnate, like I've been kind of talking about, but it's more like that she was surprised at the birth of her powers, right? Especially like when Emilicio was like, oh yeah, I sewed some soot in there, that's why you're able to do that. But then as she started doing it, she was like, oh yeah, okay, so this is the power I have now. Right? Like, I wonder if it could be possible that, like, all her powers were sort of taken away until they were, like, re-unlocked again. I don't know. It's a very interesting thing to think about, because how else would she know all of this weird stuff? You know what I mean? She's like, there's so much I want to tell you. She knows that Lord Grandfather's the root of this evil, right? Like, it could just be her own moral compass, that there's just something inside of her that tells her that this is wrong, right? Like, for, you know, faces and dolls and everything like that. Like, maybe it's that, but I don't know. I feel like there's definitely something. She knows something, and I love this. And so, yeah, she's using her soot to basically, like, maneuver the boat. Emilicio is, like, steering. Like, this was so great. Like, I loved this. And this was like my, oh, they'll push the cart down the hill and like just like fly, but like even better, because I love how they made a boat out of it, and look how much fun they're having. It's just so great. Stopping by the river was a good idea. I wonder where this river comes from and where it goes, right? And so they're basically like, let's go back and explain how they figured out how to do this. We're on a hill, so perhaps it connects to a waterway that supplies the house, right? Because we saw the waterway earlier, and I remember because I was like, Emilicio almost fell in. So I guess that like all of this was like foreshadowing, and I love it. It's just like you thought, yes, but converting the pushcart into a boat was a fabulous idea, Emilicio, and I just love that. Very impressive. You really do never give up, and I thought that was so nice. But this wouldn't work without you, Mistress Kate. You never give up either. I think that she says something like that. I guess she said something like that before, but I feel like that's the implication. Like, you know, like I thought of this, but you thought of that. So we're both great together. You know, they're trying to like pass off the credit to like each other, but like they're both just great. Like they couldn't do it without each other, and that's the most important thing. And I really just like this. Kate, she can control soot. Why has she not done so till now? Did her power just awaken? No, she was hiding it. She was always capable of it. But the question is why? Because like, yes, like that could be, you know, somebody's first inclination to hide your powers, especially if you don't know if you're supposed to have them or whatnot, if you'll be targeted for it. But I do wonder if Kate was hiding them on purpose because they would realize that no child, I guess, like no child shadow should have that much power. So there must be something going on with Kate. And so he says, damn it, why didn't I notice her clothes, right? So I feel like basically what he's saying, why didn't I notice? That's why her clothes aren't dirty, because she's been controlling the soot the entire time. She has been controlling it in front of my eyes, and I just wasn't paying attention. I feel like that's what he's saying right there. Oh yeah, see, she does say it. So she's like, yeah, you controlled it so you wouldn't get dirty. You never give up, Mistress Kate, so there's no way I would either. So yeah, she did say it. And so I thought that that was just really sweet, because it's so true. You're always carefully watching Kate, are you? Right? And so Emilicio is even like more perceptive than maybe Kate initially thought to. And I like this because she's like, well, hey, we should jump off. But instead she says, stay the course. And I feel like that's just gonna be a metaphor for like everything, like continuing past this point, is like even when things are crazy or dangerous, they will stay the course together. Emilicio, do you know why I named you that? And so I think I got that twice by accident. And so then we see, obviously, Lou and Louise. It's true that living dolls are usually given names that resemble their masters. And so, obviously, we're passing by everyone who has a name like that. And so I love this. Look at how John is like, yeah! I just love it. And, like, they're mimicking each other. So it's very, like, evident, right? Like, they're basically matching, but Lou is still a little bit more reserved. Like, her hand is always lower. That's something that I've noticed, like a trait that she has, is that when she's mimicking Louise, and we've seen it before in previous episodes, when she's mimicking Louise, she's just a little lower than Louise. She doesn't commit to like the full body action, right? Whereas like they're just like, yeah, right? Like obviously John and Sean's personality are very different, and he's doing that like cross foot thing too, like, you know, I guess they're both doing that, so they're both doing the little cross foot, but you know, John is like this, and then they're both doing the same action, right? And so they're like more mimicking, I guess you could say. And this also shows us that the last bell was for Ricky, and so that makes us concerned, like, okay, but what about Rum and Shirley? Like I was throughout my entire reactions, obviously. Shadows aren't supposed to care what their living dolls are named. And so I'm like, but how do you know that? Who told you that? So she must know more than she lets on, because how does she know that she's not supposed to care? Because Louise even says that, like, oh, well, you know, if it's a doll so unloved that, like, doesn't have a name like yours. And so, like, Louise's perspective is that, you know, you are supposed to love your doll, right? And I wonder if that'll get Louise in trouble later, just because, like, they've sort of focused on, oh, well, they're at the top, you should learn from them. But, like, the whole thing that they were talking about was that dolls are basically, like, not supposed to, you know, have personalities after a while, and if the masters get attached to them, like, they may not want to unify, or they may feel, you know, I think they say, like, uncertain or something. I don't remember exactly what the wording was, but they talk about it later, and they were like, well, maybe, you know, a shadow master will feel, like, uneasy, like, if their doll, like, raises up concerns or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, and so that's what I'm thinking, is that, like, Louise, though, like, does, like, love Lou, right? And so, again, I don't know, but yeah. But I wanted you to be a unique individual separate from Kate. And so, see, that was her plan all along, and that's what I was thinking, that she was doing this on purpose, like an experiment or something, and I'm like, but why? And so then, obviously, we see the scene where they were dancing together. So I gave you a unique name. And then we see, Emilicio, there's so much I wish to tell you once the debut is over. And so you actually see that, again, we have the statue in the background. And, like, obviously the statue was in the background the first time. But if you remember my discussion from a couple weeks ago, I talked about how this statue could have been related to Kate somehow. And I wondered whether or not, like, that was a thing, basically. Like, I basically wondered, like, whether or not Kate was, like, this person that we see in the statue. And so I do wonder, like, Emilicio, there's so much I wish to tell you once the debut is over. I'll tell you all my secrets. She has secrets! And so I'm like, well, clearly there's something more going on here, because, you know, she has so much to tell her now that they've passed the debut together. She has secrets. I feel like she wants to dismantle the system, right? Like, I feel like she wants to dismantle Lord Grandfather's system, but the question is why? Has she already been through all this? Is it possible that, like, it'd be kind of, like, weird, but it would also be kind of interesting if, like, at the beginning, there was a Lord Grandfather and Lord Grandmother type thing, but then Lord Grandmother was banished, and, like, all of that stuff, but now they have, like, found their way back, and they are, like, in Kate, basically, you know, the more for the fairy, right? And so Kate, like, is basically, like, trying to put a stop to all of this of, like, you know, what Lord Grandfather had created. And you know what this is all reminding me of? I know that, again, this is just the video of weird tangents, but there's something that happens later in this episode with the eyes getting glazed over, and it reminds me of Hadestown, which, if you guys don't know, is a musical that is based off of the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, but it also has Hades and Persephone in it, because, like, they're involved, like, in the story, and so it's kind of like a parallel thing. Like, yes, it's about Orpheus and Eurydice, like, that's kind of the plot, but, like, the Persephone and Hades part is, like, you know, showcased, I guess, like, their relationship and, like, stuff about their myth as well. And so what this is really giving me is it could be, like, those, like, Hades and Persephone vibes, you know what I mean? Because something that happens in Hadestown is that Persephone hates what Hadestown has become, because it's sort of like this musical that is set in this, like, kind of like mystical, like, industrial revolution kind of, like, age, basically. It's so weird, like, industrial revolution dystopia where the gods are still around. It's weird. But, you know, she says, like, oh, you know, this isn't how the world is supposed to be. Like, she has this whole song where she talks about, like, you know, like, this thing that you did and, like, this thing that you did, like, it's not right, it's not natural. And so I sort of wonder, like, could they be taking, like, inspiration from other fairy tales and myths like that? Because I feel like that this is definitely a very fairy tale heavy show, especially now with the fairies. And so that's kind of the thing that I'm thinking is, like, what if this, you know, because they don't really seem to have, like, ages or anything, like, they're just fairies, right? And they just take form. And so it's, like, it's kind of interesting to think that this immortal, like, kind of, like, fairy goddess has, like, basically she was banished and she came back, like, basically, how do you say it, like, copied Emilicio's, like, form and, like, believes in her enough that they will, like, rise up and, like, change the system that they've created. I don't know, it's just, like, that's so random. But the reason why I was thinking about Hadestown is because there's, when Eurydice, like, goes into Hadestown and, like, makes the contract, she's like, why do they all look like that? And, the fates tell her something like, oh, well, you know, they don't know who they are anymore, like, they've forgotten. Your eyes will look like that someday, that's what they say to her, right? And so it was the, your eyes will look like that someday, that really made me think of, like, kind of those stories and those myths in Hadestown specifically, like, you know, that glazed look that they all have later in the episode, like, that's just, like, when I was thinking about that, I was like, oh man, like, this reminds me a lot of that. And so, like, what if he is kind of like the Hades, and this is, like, I don't know, like, this is basically his Hadestown, and the dolls are kind of the same as, like, the Hades subjects in those musicals. I don't know, but that's sort of what I'm thinking. And so I'm like, who are you, Kate? This is so suspicious. Like, I have so many theories about, like, what Kate could be. Like, is she just a shadow that got another chance? Is she a shadow that maybe got all the way to the 3rd floor and then something happened? Is she something more? Is she like an immortal fairy creature? I don't know. know? And so yeah, it's definitely something to think about. There's definitely something going on with all of that. And so her and Emilicio, they both basically jump out of the cart, I think. And so what I really like about this scene is look at the veiled dolls like from this angle. Like they look like you know that scene in Hunchback of Notre Dame where Frollo is singing and there's a bunch of people in those like red hoods? Like that's sort of what it reminds me of. So we do see Kate with her wings here, and again this is like kind of more of a hint towards that whole fairy thing, but to me I'm like, that also more looks like, they more look like angel wings, or I guess you could say like demon wings. They did a little bit of an upskirt here, so I'm just like trying to cover it up. So then you see like they are shocked. We can't see, so we're not entirely sure, but they don't seem like, they aren't like lifting their hands up in surprise, so who knows, right? And so they don't even seem shocked either, and so they're just like, oh, that's completely normal. And so the wings obviously disappear, but you get that very like angel demon shape, but in the disappearing you actually see more of like that butterfly standard fairy shape. So I guess it's the first like indication that they could be fairies, because fairies aren't always like that like Tinkerbell wing style that you may see, right? Like that's something more like, I think, that Disney and stuff, and like, you know, where they got their source material from. Like sometimes fairies are depicted as having like bird-like wings as well. And so like I thought that this was so cute, because like she's just like cradling her, but then you see that she's like not feeling well. She's like, Kate's not very strong. And so I wonder if that's because of the output of the soot, or like just, I guess, a shadow like carrying someone, like she's not physically strong, you know what I mean? And so I love this. I felt so happy cradled in your arms. Like that was actually really, really cute. But then we see that the hourglass has stopped, and we know, right, that we didn't hear any more bells unless it was like covered by the rapids of the water, which it wasn't. Like we as the audience know that it must be the case that Shirley and Rum didn't make it, right? Because then we hear you were the last to arrive, and it cuts and we see that Shirley is, I guess, just standing out here all by herself. And so I do feel like there is more going on with them, though. I don't think it's over for Shirley and Rum quite yet, and we'll talk about that. But if she could control soot before the debut test, why did she hide it? What are you up to, Kate? Right? And so he's obviously like suspicious, right, that there's more to it. He obviously seems to think that there was definitely more to it than her just being like, well, you know, I didn't know if I was supposed to do that. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that there's definitely, like, he's thinking that there's more to it than that. Why would somebody hide their power? And so I feel like that definitely is gonna play into like the whole usurper thing. But then you have Ryan clapping, you have like this girl Dorothy clapping. I'm not sure about the other two, but they're like, oh, why is Master Ryan clapping? Well, obviously Ryan loves to see like chaos and death and everything, and like Shirley is out here. Well, Shirley still seems to be alive at this point, and so Rum and Shirley, they were so close, but then obviously like Shirley had fallen apart right here, and then you just see the wind sweep, and that is basically something that directs us like back, you know, back in time a little bit. And so you see that she actually says Rum's name, Mistress Shirley remembered my name, and again that wind sweep to signify the emotional moments, right? Mistress Shirley remembered my name, forgive me for choosing my own name. And then she shakes her head, right? And she could be saying like, don't worry about it, I don't, you know, it's fine. The name Rum is all right with you, I'm so glad. But remember my whole theory. It's that Shirley was in Rum's finger, and before it was just the bow, but now I think that she is in her like physical finger, basically, like the same as like how Ed and Edward are fused together. And so what I'm thinking is that this is not over. Like it is not over for them in a capacity. I don't know exactly what's gonna happen with them, but I do think that like the Rummy thing went unresolved. They cannot just get rid of her character and make us think about that for the rest of our lives. Like clearly that was important for some reason, and we're gonna know why. And so I think that like, what if what happened here is that they fused together or something? Is that like, yes, did she fall apart? Kinda, but I don't know, like there could be more to it than that. Thought we'd make it to the exit. I was sure there was time, but Mistress Shirley started slowing down. And so like she started slowing down. Now could that just be because of her like physical constitution? Like I guess, right, that she was getting weak, but what if this was all on purpose? You know, like what if Shirley's in on it with Kate? I don't know, like, you know, about the whole usurping thing? Like what if this is all part of the plan is basically what I'm saying. Though we had no hope of making it in time, I continued to hold her hand. But you guys were right there. If you guys ran, Right? Like, if they, like, you know what I mean? If they hauled ass, they could have made it because, like, she was right there when Shirley was falling apart in front of her. They were right at the gate, right? And so it seemed like, it does seem like that she was weak for some reason, and her gentle voice saying my name remained ever in my mind, right? And so happiness was right before me if only I had opened my heart sooner. And so it's kind of implied that the reason why Shirley never got to basically like have a personality is because Rum never showed her personality around her, if that makes sense. Like, that's kind of the open in your heart thing. I think like Rum is saying that, like, she doesn't know that obviously, right? As the audience, hearing what the adults say later, it is kind of implied that like that's the reason. If she had opened her heart sooner, Shirley would have been able to develop and like maintain physical form, I guess. But like, why did they tie her up like that though? That's my whole thing, is like, I guess it didn't necessarily like mean that she was strong because like Edward had no idea about Kate's output, like it was just supposed to challenge the dolls and stuff, but I thought, I was so sure. Maybe I was just wrong, guys. Maybe I was just wrong. And so then we see that Shirley has basically like, you know, faded away, I guess, in a sense. Like, she is falling apart right in front of her, and you see how this obviously is affecting Rum, and this was just terrifying. Like, this was just a horrible thing to witness, like especially how the head bent down like that was just so creepy, and like you just see her fall apart and how the clothes fall apart until she's like basically just this pile of ash, right? But you do see what's left over is the bow, and I feel like that's definitely foreshadowing to the whole Rummy situation. And so I feel like that a part of Shirley has been with Rum all along and will continue to be, and like what if that part could like grow stronger and manifest to be Shirley again, if that makes sense. Like, say that Shirley is already in Rum's finger, could it be possible for that morph or fairy or whatever you want to call it to basically regain strength and then basically have like the Ed and Edward thing where they're, you know, sort of like sharing a body? Like, maybe she just took refuge with Rum. Like, that's sort of how I see it, because look, like the bow is what's left, and like that could just be like symbolism, but I don't know. I feel like that could be possible. So that Shirley's in her finger, and we are not sure what's gonna happen with Rum just yet, right? Like, we do see that she's in the dungeon and she'll be repurposed to be a veiled doll. I don't believe that. I think that they're definitely gonna do something about that. But what if it's possible that morph, like, again, was Rummy all along, was still in her finger, and like they could basically show that they were kind of the most powerful of all? Like, what if when, you know, Edward goes back in the dungeon, he sees Shirley and he realizes that they have like already fused, like they have already done the fusion, and the pair that he, you know, was supposed to fail was actually the strongest the entire time. Like, that could be really cool, and then Edward would be like, fuck, that means I didn't fail anyone. What the fuck am I supposed to do? That would be kind of cool. And then we get emotional whiplash, right? Because she's literally dying, and then they're like, okay, time to cut back over here. I finally became your face mistress, Kate. And so they say when living dolls wear portrait, they refrain from speaking and express only their master's emotions, right? So again, right, she's saying this, but is this really how she feels? Because she wasn't that aggressive when she was speaking. And so for this to be, like, I don't think Barbie does a very good job at being a face. I don't know how they've gotten this far, but like, you guys tell me, is she supposed to be like this? You know what I mean? Is this the expression we're supposed to see on her? Because again, she seems more like quiet but deadly, and this is just like aggressive, you know? And while she was talking, she didn't seem that mad. I don't know. I guess we'll have to see. Like, it's all getting dubbed into English, and I have been keeping up with the English dub, so I guess I'll just have to watch and like see, because tone is sometimes hard to tell, and so maybe that'll help me. I don't know. But I'm just like, Barbie, are you doing a good job? Because I don't think that that's how your master feels. I don't know. Maybe. Okay, here's an idea. What if this is because her master doesn't feel like she's assertive enough, right? She's very kind of soft-spoken, right? She's very kind of quiet, and even though she has this elegance, what if she personally feels that no one will take her seriously? And so that's where Barbie comes in, because Barbie can be the aggressiveness that her shadow master needs on her face. So what if like Barbie's intentionally making her shadow master like to look more aggressive on purpose, because that's how she wants to be perceived, even though that's not how she really feels. You know what I mean? Like, kind of like pretending to be like that boss ass bitch so people take you seriously. Like, I feel like that would be very interesting for her. And so maybe it's like, not that she's not matching her. So basically, like, it's not that Barbie is not matching her Shadow Master, but rather she is being what her Shadow Master wishes that she could be. She wishes she could be more aggressive, but she doesn't really have that in her. So in order to be taken seriously, she has been like, okay, Barbie, put on your aggressive face. That's sort of how I see it. Kate, you are free to mingle with the other shadows. And so I guess that these are all Starbearers, because she says something along the lines of like, oh, only Starbearers should know about your powers, right? And so we see like these two that we saw before. I still don't really have a good grasp on their personality. I don't know, they kind of just seem nice. They're kind of hunched over a little bit, so they may be like a kind of a nerd archetype character. Then we have this big guy who we've seen with Barbie before. I can't really like, I don't know, I can't say anything about him just because we didn't really see him in action much. And then we have like the girl that brought them in here in the first place. However, you must not speak of your soot powers with them, which is fascinating because like John did that basically, right? He told Kate that he went kaboom. They don't know about that obviously, but I wonder if it's just specifically Kate or, oh, okay, well no, you must not speak of your soot powers with them. That is between the Starbearers and those in which such power has awakened. So I guess talking with John is fine, but they don't want her talking about her soot power because the masters need to learn it on their own in order to like basically prove their usefulness in a sense, right? Like it seems like that basically what happens is that, hey, don't talk about it to anyone else, because if they know that they can do it, that gives them a hint and they need to naturally find out on their own. Obviously they don't tell Kate that, but that's why I think that they have that rule in place, because the whole thing is like you as a shadow need to discover your power. If somebody else tells you, oh hey, you know, we're all supposed to have powers, that may mean that you go looking for it and you become more competent than you were originally supposed to be. That is between the Starbearers, so that implies that everybody in this room is also a Starbearer. So she says, any questions? No, one need but obey the rules. And I like this because Kate seems kind of like sly or sarcastic there, so again it could be implied that like Kate does not want to follow the rules, right? Like obviously Kate says some choice things about Lord Grandfather later, right? And so she finds that infuriating, and so I feel like that that's kind of funny, at least, is that she does seem to have kind of like a little angry side towards it. Look at her. Yeah, and so I feel like that she is acting more aggressive on her Shadow Master's behalf because that's how she wants to be seen, rather than that being like her actual character, because she didn't seem that way at all. Now I love this. Oh my gosh, like this was so cool to see, especially just because like we talked about before, you know, they could have just made these characters like regular background characters, but like look at this, like this hairstyle and this hairstyle, like some of this is so unique. The only complaint that I have so far is that like this girl has bows and so does this girl, whereas it's kind of shown that like bows and flowers are usually the way to go, so that could have just been a mistake. I'm not sure. Maybe that has some symbolism for some reason, right? Maybe not all of them. Well, no, Kate has flowers, right? So that doesn't seem very relevant, if that makes sense. It seems like that they all have either like, I don't know, like just different hair things or flowers in their hair, right? So I'm like, I don't know, that could be a little error for you. You should have like bows or something. It seems like that these two, like the twins, have like a more, I don't know how you call it, but like a little hair tie with like the ball, I guess, right? Like I don't know what they are, but I've seen them before. And so like, for example, that shadow has that instead of the flowers. And so I do wonder, like maybe the flowers are more symbolic. Like maybe I just misinterpreted the fact that they all, you know, that Kate obviously has flowers and bows. Like maybe it's on me, I don't know. Like maybe I assume that, but that's not necessarily the case, and that could hint towards something else, I don't know. Congratulations to Kate, the final candidate to pass. So, you know, I do like how Emilicio does mimic her, but the thing is that Kate curtsies while Emilicio bows, and Emilicio is bowing in a very like traditional way, like, whereas she is curtsying in a very noble way, if that makes sense. And bowing is still noble, especially like in places like Japan. But do you guys understand what I'm saying? Like there's just a difference. Like this is more of, again, maybe an indication that Emilicio was brought up very differently, like not necessarily like noble class, if that makes sense. Because it's in interesting because she bows, but like this is also kind of implied to take place in a more like Victorian style, and so like the curtsy is something like, you know, in that time period, like very like, you know, like English and stuff like that. And so I wonder like about that a little bit. So we see John and Sean, and something very interesting about this is that they don't show any of their faces, which should have been the first indication that something was wrong. But also, as we're going around here, we don't actually we do see Ricky's face over here, but we don't actually see anybody else have that glazed look over their eye at this point. Everyone from the children's wing is gathered here, and so then they're offered coffee by, obviously, this is the Starbearer that we had seen before, and so this is, again, kind of what I mean. Like, she doesn't really have, like, flowers, but she has those, like, ruffles, whereas she doesn't. Everyone from the children's wing is gathered here. Would you like a cup? Thank you. What is it? It's so dark. It's a drink served only to shadows with faces, and so you can even see, kind of, like, this could just be heat, because somebody did tell me that this is how they draw shadows and stuff. Like, this is how, obviously, like, they have to differentiate it from the actual soot, and so they do, like, this sort of animation, like the lines, right? Like, so it could just be heat, but to me, this could have been the first indication that there was soot in here. I wondered if Kate had noticed, but I don't think that she did, because she's still, like, she did say that she prefers tea anyway, so that could be an indication whether it's Kate or, like, her subconscious or something, right? Like, say it's Kate, but then it's also that, like, old eternal shadow that I talked about before, like, or I guess fairy woman. Like, maybe the fairy woman was like, nah, you prefer tea, sis, right? Something like that. But in other words, those who are deemed adults, right? So it's weird that she let Emilicio drink it if she knew what it was at first glance, but it seemed like that she knew afterwards that it was not good. Once you get used to it, you won't be able to get enough. So that's like very big drug vibes, that they're just drugging all of them. It's like a cult, and like, look at her, your worries will vanish, and she's smiling evilly, right? At least in my opinion, that's very evil. It's probably a drink called coffee. It was mentioned in the book, and so now we know that the coffee is evil, but Kate doesn't care for it. She prefers tea, and I'm like, but why, Kate? Because you know what's really going on, right? Because, like, they're not affected by the coffee at all. Like, it's only the dolls, right? Because the soot impacts them, but I wonder if that's why. Maybe she's like, hey, Emilicio, I prefer tea, so you should have tea, but instead, right, Emilicio just drinks it. And so I wonder, though, like, why didn't she stop her, right? And so she says, it seems like such a waste, allow me. And so again, like, you know, not wanting to waste food or anything, that is very, like, somebody that wasn't from a noble family would think about. And so it says, but you don't seem to care for it either, right? So she's trying to basically be like, hey, you don't seem to care for it either, so, you know, maybe you shouldn't drink it, right? And so this was a cute moment, but at the same time, I'm like, Kate, why didn't you stop her, right? Like, if you knew that it was bad, why didn't you stop her? So I feel like she didn't know. She was just trying to, I don't know what she was trying to do. I don't know if she was trying to do anything. Maybe she just didn't know. But if she did know, why didn't she try to, like, stop her a bit more forcefully, right? Maybe she would have, but they were in public. I don't know. It could be something like that, right? Because she's trying to give her hints, like, hey, but you don't seem to care for it, right? So you don't need to drink it, right? Like, she could have just smacked it out of her hand or something. So I don't know. And then you also kind of want to study the effects so you know what you're up against. And so that's kind of like a little, like, manipulative, I guess. But, like, hey, you gotta understand the enemy. Like, maybe Emilicio is a necessary sacrifice, but I do wonder how long the coffee is gonna last for, because it doesn't seem like any of the other dolls have that glazed expression. So it's like, have they drunk it so much that they don't even realize? Or, like, does it wear off after a while? Like, did they only, like, none of them have the glazed expression here because they're all drinking it at the same time, and it was right when they went outside to see Lord Grandfather that it had, like, activated. Like, maybe it activates and deactivates, and then, like, when it deactivates, Emilicio will be back to normal. I don't know. But yeah, so then we have Mary Rose and Rosemary, and I love them. She's, like, so butch. I love her so much. And they're all, like, stopping to look. Our faces are already well acquainted, and so I really like her. Like, I'm just like, this, like, Pride Month is here, baby. Like, this is, like, big gay energy, I guess. And so look at her, she's like, wink, right? And so I really like that, because because she's not supposed to, I guess, like, talk as a face, but she's also kind of getting a message to Emilicio. She's like, hey, Emilicio, good job. Like, that's what the wink could be. Or she's, like, flirting with her, right? Because it does seem to imply, like, oh, she's so gallant. Like, I think that's just kind of a covert way of saying masculine, if that makes sense. And so maybe she's flirting with Kate. I don't know. I'm Maryrose. Our faces are well acquainted. And then you see, like, oh, it's Rosemary's Shadow Master, right? Like, Emilicio looks so excited. And so she is wearing heels. Almost beauticious Kate. Our faces are on the same team. That's kind of interesting for her to say it like that, because, like, oh, well, what if that's, you know, foreshadowing for the future that, like, she's part of the revolution to dismantle the system, but, like, functionally, for cleaning duties, they are on the same team, so maybe it's just not that deep. So you shall become quite close to Maryrose, and so I thought that was pretty cute, because I wonder, like, she says that, and so I'm like, ooh, well, do they finally get to socialize now? Do they get to do something while their dolls are cleaning? Like, has Maryrose and Sarah been hanging out together this entire time? Like, you know what I mean? Because they say, like, hey, you know, since they're on the same team, you'll become close to me. Like, I wonder if now that, like, they're out of the rooms, they can see each other regularly, right? Like, they'll be a part, I guess, of the ground floor of the wing, maybe? Because, like, I guess, are they still in the children's wing? Because it's sort of, like, implied, like, oh, yeah, you'll have to do a lot to rise to the top of, like, Lord Grandfather's wing. Like, do they get to stay here now? Is there, like, a common room? Do y'all hang out? Like, I don't know. And so I really like this, and I just like it so much because I feel like that this is so, like, I guess, again, gentlemanly, but she's also a girl, and so I feel like that this is, like, very nice. She's a lady, right? It's just, she seems so gallant, right? I guess not gallant, but, like, I feel like that's maybe, I'll look up the word, just in case. I may be jumping to conclusions. Is defined as a man who is polite and attentive to a woman. Okay, so a knight or something, and so I feel like that, yeah, it's basically just, like, you know, a fancy way of saying she's very, like, knightly and, like, kind of, like, again, more masculine. It reminds me of Cat Noir, you know, kissing everybody's hand, like, in Miraculous Ladybug, because he's so much of a gentleman, right? Like, that's sort of what it's supposed to mean, and so I feel like that's very, very interesting. Don't spoil the children, Sarah, and so I wonder if spoil meant with attention, or, like, don't spoil the children on what's yet to come, because Kate doesn't know, that they'll all be hanging out after the debut, because she basically says, hey, you know, since our faces are on the same team, like, we'll be spending a lot of time together, basically, right? And so I wonder if that could be, like, a twofold thing, like, hey, don't spoil them, like, on, you know, what's to come next, like, Kate doesn't know what we all do together all day while our dolls are off cleaning, or it could just be, again, attention. Congratulations, Kate, well done. Sarah thought you a failure, but even the lowest ranked shadow passed. One gets shivers in my spine with each visit here, and so I feel like she's basically trying to say, like, she's trying to establish herself, or, like, mark her territory as, like, hey, you passed, but I'm still, like, top bitch. I'm gonna rise up. It's not every day one gets to visit Lord Grandfather's wing. So yeah, this would imply that they are not, like, permanently in this wing anymore. Like, they're still going back to the children's wing, but they need to basically rise up in the children's wing, become adults, and then they'll, like, rise up in the adult wing. I feel like that's kind of what they're saying, and so I do feel like that they'll be able to, like, hang out with each other and stuff now, but it just won't be over here, I guess. And so yeah, this is a very, like, Sarah face, I imagine. There will come a day when Sarah shall be summoned here, right? So again, they don't permanently stay around here. Of course, this is but the first floor. It may seem strange after entering from the garden, right? Because that was kind of, like, elevated and weird, right? But this is the ground level, right? So this is, like, the bottom floor. As the lowest ranked, you must work hard to move up. And so I guess they're gonna keep their rankings even after this point, right? Like, just as they go about their lives, I guess. And so I guess that they're ranked, and then they're also probably ranked against everybody else as well. You know what I mean? Like, they're just put into this giant, I imagine this board with, like, 100 names, and you can see everybody's ranking or something like that. For starters, you may use Louise as an excellent example. And then they kind of, like, point over to her, I guess. Louise is at the top. And so I feel like that they were either pointing at Louise directly or, like, the ranking board, because I think everyone can see it. Here are the 4 pairs that have grown up today. So again, obviously growing up is a very big thing in fairy tales, right? And so I feel like that this is when the juice starts to kick in, or the coffee, and that's why everybody is, like, screaming in delight at the fact that a doll has, like, failed and been called, I guess you could say, right? And so then, congratulations, well done. And you sort of see how everybody has a blank look in the background that you may not notice necessarily, like, the very first time that you're watching, just because you're probably focused on them. Some people may have seen it. I don't think think that I did. I can't remember. But now you can definitely see it like when it's paused. And so then Kate thinks, oh, Emilicio, you must be sad because Kate is realizing that Shirley did not make it. And so then you see the final rankings. So it's Louise, John, Patrick, Kate, and then obviously Shirley is at the bottom. 4 of 5 pairs passed this time, a most impressive feat. And so that kind of implies that that doesn't happen every day. It's more likely that it's probably usually 3 out of 5 or something like that. And the single incompetent pair that failed will be, and so you see that Shirley's at the bottom, and then discarded. And so she does throw it with a lot of aggression, so maybe I was wrong about Barbie's Shadow Master, obviously, but then you see the broken pieces of Shirley, and that just made me so sad. And you see everyone smiling in the crowd, right? Because they have already been, like, mind-wiped, I guess, and none of the other shadows, like, I mean, I guess you wouldn't tell if the shadows are uncomfortable with it, because all their dolls are just, like, mind-wiped, right? And so Louise doesn't even give a shit, right? She's like, oh, what a joy to bask in this glory. Like, she could not care. Louise is so beautiful that anyone would want to be like her, right? So she's already, like, you know, trying to be the popular girl, planting those seeds, I think. And so then, how can they be so delighted in the failure of their own kind? So this is Patrick. And so that's very interesting because, like, Patrick is actually kind of concerned now. Like, Patrick may be on the revolution train. Because I always thought, like John and Sean, they think so much that they may work with Kate and Emilicio on this revolution train. But now I'm like, oh, well, Patrick's suspicious too. He may, you know, join in, right? What happens to shadows who fail, right? So he's like, how can they be delighted in the failure of their own kind? So how can dolls be delighted that a doll failed? But then he's like, but what happens to the shadow? Like, what happens to the shadow who failed, right? But obviously, Shirley just kind of disappeared, and so we don't really still know what would have happened to her if she didn't just kind of, you know, like, die like that. How should Patrick even feel, Ricky? So he's, like, looking at him for validation, but, you know, he's just like, right? You know what I mean? He's been mind-wiped, but I don't think Patrick realizes it because he looks at him and he's just like, no, like, one must learn to be confident on one's own. So he's just like, no, I can't look to Ricky, like, to see how I have to feel, right? Like, you know, I have to feel confident in myself. So I don't think even noticed at first. He just thought that, like, Ricky had the same, like, confident, like, smirk as always, right? So it was Rum. She seemed to be doing well, but she'll be discarded? No, one cannot question Shadow House's rules. But this is something else that Sean has felt in the specific, like, case of, like, oh, why is there a trap here? No, can't think about it, right? And so they're on to something. They know that something is wrong, but they're trying to stop themselves from thinking about it. That's what constantly is happening with them, right? And so I feel like that's very interesting, is that even though, again, personalities are totally different, they're both, like, thinking that something is definitely wrong with Shadow's house, that things shouldn't be like this, but yet they try to, like, push it out of their minds. But I feel like that John will convert to, like, Kate's side, if there will be a side. Isn't that right, Sean? And then Sean's just like, and so he knows that his doll is not like that, right? And so that's when he gets suspicious too. Let us adjourn to the garden. Let us adjourn to the garden. It is time to be received in audience, right? And so they're basically saying it's time to be received by Lord Grandfather, I guess, for them to be received, right? And so obviously all of the dolls and their masters are right here at the front. And again, we see that glazed look, the indication that something's wrong. You can, like, definitely see it now, especially after they had panned back to each other. So John is trying to be like, psst, Kate, I sent you a note. You know, I feel like that's basically what he's trying to do here. And so he passes her a napkin, and I'm sure there's something written inside of that we will see next episode, like 100%. And so, Kate, right? And so, like, she doesn't look at it, she just holds it, right? And he's like, Kate, look at the napkin, right? And so she probably opens it after this point, but then it just cuts away and, like, we don't see it. We'll see it next episode, I'm sure. Now for an encounter you shall never forget. Presenting the noblest of personages, I guess. And so then, obviously, all the dolls go crazy. They're all, like, screaming and, like, it's like, you know, it's like a concert in this scene. And you get, like, that cult vibe, I guess. I don't know how else to explain it. Like, you feel the cultishness. It's so creepy. All they see is his hands, and everyone's going crazy. Like, that blur effect is, like, again, that very anime thing, like something is clearly fucking wrong here, you know? Like, it's just the creep factor to the max, right? Obviously, I think that the side profiles are really important here because Louise is happy, Patrick is happy, especially because, like, they wanted to be validated by Lord Grandfather, but you see John and Kate are like, no, right? So I think John knows something's wrong. Like, he's just, like, suspicious in general, and so that's why, like, he's not smiling. And then Kate says this. So he's the root of all this evil. So she knows that it's evil. So what I'm sort of wondering, what would be cool if not, like, my immortal goddess theory, is that, like, I'm sure that fairies like this just exist maybe elsewhere in the world, and it'd be funny if, like, one of them knew that some sus shit was happening in Shadow's house and, like, infiltrated or something. Like, that would kind of be something interesting to think about too, because they talk about them later, that Lord Grandfather basically allowed them, you know, he made this method, and so that's why they all live here and, like, live under him, right? But, like, what if there are other fairies in the world and they don't like all of this, and so maybe she, like, infiltrated somehow. I think that's kind of a cool idea too. And so then you see Emilicio and you see again that thing in her eyes, and it's, like, awful. And again, like, this reminds me of Edward's pupils and how we knew that they were, like, sus and creepy, and they're all just, like, crying, they're all acting the same. The dark drink they gave us, don't tell me, so she knows. And then we see that it was laced with soot, right? That all the cups have soot on them. So this guy's smoking his cigar, Ryan is sitting on the couch, Butterfly Lady is, I don't know what she's doing. It seems like she's almost eating soot or something, right? And so I love this too because, like, they're revealed to be fairies and she, like, looks most like one of the fairies, right? And so this girl, Dorothy, has one of those little things that we saw at the very beginning of the series, and I was like, it makes so much sense because that's something that I pointed out. I was like, do you guys remember when all the humans were lying down on the table and there were these little shadows? Well, what if those shadows, like, morphed into, like, you know, the Shadow Masters? Because that's something that I've been saying, is that the dolls were not made to look like the shadows morphed themselves to look like their dolls. And so it's so nice how all of this connects. Like, we finally see the reveal. So they come through, let us see your faces. Now what's interesting about this is that you can tell when Ed is being Ed with face, when Edward is being Shadow, and when Edward is having face but is not Ed. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? Like, you can tell sometimes there's Ed the doll, right? Then there's Edward using the doll's face, right? And so that's what this scene is that, you know, this is Edward talking. I think that you can even hear, like, the difference in his voice, right? Louise receives passing marks for facial compatibility and soot volume. John's soot volume surpasses expectations, but his personality is ill-fitted for his face. And so it sounds like that it's not even over yet. You know, they're gonna continue to be judged because there's phases to this, right? And so, you know, John, he has good potential, but he may not get to that phase. Patrick is compatible with his face, but his soot volume is poor. And so basically what they're saying is, like, hey, he's compatible, but the soot volume is poor. Maybe he'll grow into it. So it feels like that they're still being tested long after this debut, right? As you saw, my lord, Shirley had yet to acquire a personality, a fundamental flaw. I foresaw such outcomes based on their pre-debut information. The living doll, Rum, is inadequate as a face. It is believed she never gave her master a kiss goodnight. And so I love that he's, like, taking that very seriously, but I guess it's kind of a show of, like, loyalty and stuff. So he's like, I heard a rumor that she never gave her master a kiss goodnight. Like, that's kind of funny, I guess, even though it's awful. Edward, let us test your knowledge, right? And so this is interesting because I think that the reason why they have this conversation is because they talk about in last episode how they're questioning Edward's methods, basically. How they're, like, skeptical of him. How they're like, Edward, like, you know, why would you do this? Because, you know, dolls are supposed to be this, shadows are supposed to be that. Like, you doing this test could, like, break the whole thing. And so I feel like she's like, Edward, let us test your knowledge. We do what? And then he answers, so, therefore, why the fuck are you doing this, right? So this is basically, like, the catalyst for this conversation. What is a shadow and what is its purpose? A shadow is a form of morph, a parasitic fairy skilled in mimicry and imitation, right? So this is what I'm saying, is that, like, what if there are morphs elsewhere and, like, Kate, like, infiltrated, basically? You know what I mean? Like, what if she's a morph from somewhere else? Like, she heard, you know, as a morph what was going on, like, as a fairy in a different, like, I don't know, a different country or something. Like, she heard the rumors of the Shadow's house and she was like, what the fuck is going on over there? That could be possible.
We all once took this form. Lord Grandfather devised the process by which morphs acquire personalities and become shadows. And so what I'm assuming is like that he has a morph like tricked a human one day, I guess, and like it's been like that ever since. And so that's why they all worship him too, is because he made this process, right? And so it seems like that they can also make morphs. Like it seems like that she did that, unless like she just brought the morph with her for this demonstration. But yes, this is what was happening in the first episode, the little things with the arms. I love that. In stage 1, morphs are shown living dolls. They may recognize and mimic the human form. And so my thing about this is that I wonder if that's why Kate talks about herself in third person, just because like they're skilled in mimicry and like illusion or whatever they had said, right? But like, why would they just go along with all this like it's normal? Like, wouldn't they know that they saw their dolls and took shape of their dolls? Like, were they not allowed to tell them? Like, you think that they would be aware. So how did they erase the memory of the morph? Or at this point, does the morph not even have consciousness? Because the way I'm kind of imagining Kate is that like inside of Kate there is a morph, and the morph knows, like the morph knows all of this, but then Kate, as in her like consciousness, does not know. So like the morph is like the subconscious, because that's the only thing I'm confused about. Like, would you not remember this, or do they not start having memories until they encounter their doll for the first time? That's kind of how it seems, just based off of like, then they say in stage 2 a personality is acquired by interacting with the living doll, and so they just may not remember for some reason. Like, they may not have a personality until they interact, and therefore they have no memory, but Shirley clearly has memory. So yeah, I'm just wondering, like, how do the shadows forget this part? Forget that they're morphs? Or are they just not allowed to tell? I don't know. And in stage 3, soot powers awaken and unification takes place. And so I'm like, you're missing a couple steps there, Edward, right? Because, like, technically, in stage 3, well, you know, Kate and John already have awakened their soot powers, so clearly, like, you know, they're not unifying anytime soon, or at least I imagine they're not. Sarah and Mia are not unified, right? So I feel like that, you know, there's a little bit more in between in there, right? It's like the soot powers have to grow, and then eventually unification takes place. It's not like instant, you know what I mean? And anyway, in short, a face is acquired by taking over the doll's body, right? And so that's basically what they've all done. In a sense, creating a perfect being possessing soot powers and transcending humankind, right? So they can kind of be human and they can be like fairy creatures. And so I'm assuming that that's how they control the town below, also probably resources and stuff. But if a shadow fails to acquire personality in stage 2, we may infer that its morph's life force was too weak. So kind of like a fairy's like spirit or like essence, right? Shirley certainly fits that pattern. No wonder she withered on the vine. So they're like, she fits the pattern, but to perish like soot in the wind was a first. And so they're like, okay, you're saying that, so sure, like we could say that that's what happened to Shirley, but I've never seen something like that happen before. That is to me what Ryan is saying, because like think about what he's saying here. He's like, it was hilarious, but one can't help but wonder, right? So what is he wondering? If something else happened, that's basically what he's saying. Like, you're saying that she just died, right? That her life force wasn't strong enough, but he's more so thinking, probably anyway, like he's just like, that's a little suspicious, you know? Like, that doesn't sound right. At least that's how I'm thinking of it. Edward, did you foresee that happening? So you could say that that's what he was wondering. One can't help but wonder, Edward, did you foresee that happening so you would have an easy pair to fail, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, he could just be accusing Edward of like, oh, well, you know, if you foresaw that, right? If you knew that, why didn't you tell us? Because, like, you made her go through the debut just so you would have an easy one to fail, you know, so your job would be easier. So it could be like that. So that's what he's wondering. Like, did you see that? Like, were you kind of cheating a little bit, bro? No, it's not like that. I wish to entertain you third floor lords, and I tried to save the trouble of discarding her by having her in the debut. A slight error on my part led to Shirley bonding with her doll during the debut. And so obviously we see these scenes again, and even though she was doomed to die, her personality began to develop, right? And so I feel like that, and that is why these unfortunate unforeseen events occurred, or so I believe. And so that's basically like, no. Okay, the reason why she floated away in the wind was because she actually did kind of have a personality, so it kind of counts. I feel like that's basically what he's saying here. But their conversation in the bush that we didn't get to hear, right? Like, I'm wondering if, like, she knows more than she's letting on, and that she told that to Rum, right? Like, I feel like that my finger theory is still definitely out there, that they could have, I feel like that they merged. I feel like that they already unified, that her soot powers had already awakened, but she was just keeping it, like, secret or something. Maybe she's a lot like Kate. I don't know. Perhaps I went too far in staging a Shadow's death as some sort of show. So now he's like, oh, well, maybe I went too far. You know, like, maybe I shouldn't have done that to entertain you. So he's trying to be like, hey, nothing suspicious here. I was just trying to entertain you. Even if I did know that she would die, I wanted you guys to see it. It is only natural that the failures be called. So Dorothy's like, it doesn't really matter, right? Like, you know, it's only natural that the failures were called that way. We need but those who prove useful to Lord Grandfather. And so the manner in which the debut was held is another concern. So their first concern was like, what the fuck happened to Shirley? That was one. But the second thing is what they were talking about, like basically the entire time we saw them, of Edward, your methods, right? Like, you know, it led the faces to threat over trivial matters. They talked about that, and then Dorothy was like, but isn't loyalty also important? Doesn't it seem like now when you say that like Dorothy was almost trying to protect Edward while Ryan was like scrutinizing him, you know? Like, so what if like the thing that they say later about the shadows like trying to take over, like what if Dorothy's like in on it? I don't know. Faces with ideas of their own may cast doubt upon Shadow's house. Of course, we can have them drink Lord Grandfather's soot coffee to alter their thinking that swiftly erases their memory, right? So here's the question about that. Like, alters their thinking and erases their memory are two different things. And so are all of the dolls gonna have their memory erased and not remember what happened before the debut? Because that would be literally crazy. Like, that would be like a soft reset, if that makes sense, and the dolls would have to catch them up to speed. So I think that it's like alter their thinking or erase their memory depending on what's going on. Filling them with loyalty towards Lord Grandfather. But what if Shadows influenced by the doubt of their faces, right? So basically, like, you know, what if the shadows start to be influenced if their faces start to get suspicious, and like, you know, they're thinking over trivial matters, and they're realizing, why is there a trap door here? Why are they trying to kill us, right? Asking all the why questions. Lord Grandfather's soot has no effect on shadows, and that's very interesting because, again, you have to wonder if Shirley is within Rum and has been all along, and Edward's like, don't worry about her, I gave her some coffee. First of all, Rum has like a perfect photographic memory, so I feel like that we're gonna get a Promised Neverland situation, and I've tried to be vague about this in the past, but there's a character in Promised Neverland who remembers everything from birth, and so they know, like, they've known the secret of the house all along. I'll you know, leave it right there. And so I kind of thought, like, oh, well, what if Rum was like that? However, Rum did seem to have her memory erased. Like, she never was like, hey, Emilicio, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I used to live here. Why are we here? Like, she never had any indication that she remembered her life before. However, that would have been before. Like, when she first got to the house, she didn't have, like, Rummy with her yet. Like, Rummy came afterwards, right? So what if now that Shirley, like, what if they fuse together and she'll remember everything? What if she's, like, she does become a veiled doll, but then she goes around, like, in secret, like, incognito, if that makes sense, and is like, psst, Emilicio, what the fuck, right? You know what I mean? Like, she basically is, like, undercover from that point on. I think that would be really cool. I used to have this idea a long time ago that if a doll failed, instead of being a veiled doll, they could possibly get a second chance and basically pair it up with a new shadow, because that was basically my theory. It's not the dolls that are made after the shadows, but instead the shadows morph to look like the dolls. And so my theory is that Rum would have her memory erased and that she would have a new shadow master, right? But then Emilicio would be like, oh, Rum, you're back. Like, what happened to you and Shirley? Did you actually pass? And then she'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, you know what I mean? And so that Shirley would not be the same Shirley originally, but then that would reveal the secrets of the house, right? And so I guess that's why they don't do it. You know what I mean? Because then anybody that was with the doll before would know, like, oh, but dolls are made after their masters, and so what happened to your master? Like, that would cause too much thinking. So that was another theory I had. But I kind of like veiled doll incognito mode, or them having to actually pass Rum in the end because Shirley has fused with her. I like both of those ideas. Indeed, the greatest risk lies in Shadows being influenced by a doll's defiance, right? And so I feel like that the way they're talking about this, I feel like that this is Ed and Edward, right? Is that Ed probably was defiant first, and now Edward is like pretending that he's not, but like they want to usurp Lord Grandfather. That's like my whole thing, is that I feel like that they're basically all talking about themselves, right? If we use the coffee to make faces loyal to Lord Grandfather, that will influence their shadows, so you needn't to be concerned, right? Because my whole theory was that like Ed and like their group, like they have planned to like be different, and like instead of a takeover, they have formed a partnership. And so like I wonder if Ed's defiance influenced Edward, same with again all of the other dolls in their shadows, and so it's almost like they're talking about them. I've had Shirley's living doll Rum drink the coffee to reset her memory. She'll be repurposed as a veiled doll, and like I don't know, right? Because obviously this is a dungeon, we don't see her, but I'm a little suspicious. And so again, I've already talked about all my plans laid out, but either one, the Rummy thing is like very important. They've unified. That was like a unification thing, like not just dust in the wind, but it actually like fused with her somehow. I don't know. That's one. And then he has to take her out of like, you know, the death dungeon. Two is that she drinks the coffee, but she'll remember everything, right? Like, you know, her fabulous memory, and she'll be incognito. And then three, the other thing that I said. I take great care that malcontents do not root, right? And so he's like basically saying like, hey, you know, I'm trying to make sure that there are no usurpers. But then Ryan like body slams him with his shadow powers, right? You think Ryan is worried about such matters? No one would dare defy us, right? And so it's like, you know, what are you trying to say that I'm implying? Like, no one would dare defy us, right? But at the same time, clearly they are in defiance. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like Ed and them, they are in defiance. Now then, Kate. So they're just going through their list of grievances, right? Kate, the lowest ranked of them all. That was quite amusing. Her power awakened, a laudable achievement, right? And so I feel like that they're basically saying that, wait, her power awakened, so they should be like first up to unify. That's very interesting because John had great power too, but it definitely seems like he didn't talk about Kate like while he was listing, right? He was like, you know, John has potential, like Patrick's soot output isn't great, but Kate's power awakened like holy, right? You know what I mean? Like her whole power awakened differently than it did, because like for them it was subconscious. Like John exploding stuff was subconscious the first time and then intentional the second time. Like he still may have a way to go, but Kate may be the closest one to the whole unification thing. I still feel like they have to grow up though. Like I still feel like that they have to become adults before that happens, because all the kids that we see still have their dolls out. Edward, by using this debut as a proving ground for the Shadows family potential, you hasten to Shadow's awakening and more. So he's actually impressed. He's just like, oh, Edward, like you actually did something here, right? He's like impressed more than anything. From this day forth, we place the children's wing in your care. So he's basically like, you know, despite everybody else's complaints, you hastened an awakening more quickly, and that's what we like, because we like people to be awakened to their powers and useful. And secondly, you know, there's some other stuff, like, and more, right? Like this is very intriguing to me. Like I said this before, but he seemed to be the most intrigued out of like anyone at what Edward was doing, right? And so then he gets the keys to the children's wing, I guess. Let us see how you do. So now he's in charge of all the debuts, I'm assuming, so they can like, you know, continue this experiment. But then Ryan takes it upon himself to be like, as a judge, you failed but one pair and they were already goners, right? Such meager results will never get you to the third floor. And so he's basically saying that he has to call more in the future. Understood, I shall redouble my efforts. So back to the drawing board, debut number 2, Electric Boogaloo. And so I wonder if Emilicio will now be in a position where she actually like helps the dolls that haven't debuted yet. Like that would be so cool if we actually see like more characters, because I think that the one that they used, the one that we saw in like Edward's example, like the girl with like the fluffy hair, if that makes sense, like they also showed her dying, so I feel like that was just an example. That wasn't like an actual child, if that makes sense. Like that wasn't an actual person, but that would kind of be cool. Like imagine if that's the girl that is now, like, you know what I mean? But I don't think they're gonna change protagonists or anything. I'm just sort of thinking about like, you Emily Co, there's another generation of kids. Like, what if that line of kids that we saw in the example was the actual, line of kids, though, the next kids? It's a shame we won't rise to the third floor just yet. The debut was not to their satisfaction. We must be of greater service to Lord Grandfather. So I now realize what's happening in this scene. At first, I thought that Ryan was saying that the other third floor lords were basically, out to get Lord Grandfather or something, but now I understand. So he's going through them one by one. He's saying Ryan, that arrogant buffoon, had the nerve to interrupt Lord Grandfather, right? So Ryan interrupted Lord Grandfather when Lord Grandfather was actually like, nah, dude, I'm gonna give him control of the children's ward. I like what he did. You know what I mean? So he's saying Ryan's a buffoon. Why does Lord Grandfather have such frivolous fools by his side? So then he's talking about Sophie. So this is Edward. He's talking about Ryan is a buffoon. Sophie is a frivolous fool. And then I should be the one serving him. He doesn't say anything about this guy. Those malcontents, once I expose them, Lord Grandfather will understand, right? And so he said, I try my hardest to make sure there are no malcontents, but I think Edward is saying that he knows that there are malcontents. Those third floor wastrels are out to destroy him. It seems to imply that he's talking about the third floor lords, if that makes sense. He's saying that they're out to destroy Lord Grandfather, but I thought that was going to be Edward's whole thing, was little revolution, little coup. But basically what he could be talking about is once I expose them, Lord Grandfather will understand. But maybe he's saying something else. Maybe he's saying those malcontents, once I expose them, Lord Grandfather will understand, referring to other people, like Kate or something. Because it seems that basically what he's saying is that the third floor lords are out to destroy him, but not they're planning a coup. More so though, they just spend all their time snacking and laughing and drinking, and they're probably not actually aware of what's going on in Shadow's house. So that's what I think is actually happening. In that case, I must catch her in the act. So that's what he's talking about. He's listen, all of them up there are stupid and frivolous. Why are they with Lord Grandfather? They will literally watch as Lord Grandfather gets destroyed because they're all too stupid to see what I see. They're too stupid or naive to think that nobody is rebelling. That's basically what Ed is saying. And so he's saying in that case, I must catch her in the act. And so I feel that again, this is the ends justify the means, because I had this idea that, and I've talked about it in this video too, that Ed just wants to create a new world, no more bad face takeover, basically. That was the essence, and that the kids were just the end that justified the means. That was my whole idea. But now I'm sort of but doesn't that contradict this when he's saying that he'll expose the malcontents? No, because what's the best way to make it seem like you're loyal, right? If you are planning a coup, the best way to make it seem like you're loyal is to find somebody else that is a malcontent, to find somebody else that is the traitor, and be see, Lord Grandfather, I found the traitor. Your other third floor lords, they didn't find the traitor. They're useless. Hire me. And then when he gets higher up, then he'll kill Lord Grandfather. That's what I'm thinking, is that Kate is just an end to justify the means. Kate is basically just the scapegoat, so he can point and say, see, that's the traitor, not me. I find the traitors. Your third floor lords, they didn't find shit. I feel that's basically the idea, right? That malcontent Kate, so he knows that Kate is bad, basically. He knows that there's something up with her. And you see her playing with her doll, and so we wonder if she had a past life again. I've become quite efficient at cleaning. All that's left is to clean the bathroom. Wasn't it a shock what happened to Rum? And so Emilico is still not normal, so I'm assuming that this is the next day and it'll hopefully pass out of her system. Or what Kate could do is if this drink is basically altered their thinking because of Lord Grandfather's soot, what would happen if Emilico drank some tea with Kate's soot and Kate's intentions? Maybe that could break the spell. I don't know. Wasn't it a shock what happened to Rum? You were close, weren't you? Yes. And then we don't see her eyes because again, it's supposed to be that anime eye thing. That was unfortunate, but living dolls no longer of service to Shadow's house must be discarded. And so again, we know that this isn't Emilico. That's the way it is. And so Kate looks up at her, not shocked, because she probably sees that Emilico is still, messed up because of the drink and everything. And with that, we are basically finished. And so I feel that next week, it's either gonna wear off and Kate's gonna fill her in, or Kate will have to try to break the curse. And I'm really interested because Kate did say, hey, after the debut, I'll tell you everything I know. No more coffee. Like, the next couple of weeks, we may actually get into, like, okay, Kate's, like, planning the revolution. She's telling Emilicio everything. That may be where we're going. Maybe we'll find out what happened to Rum and Shirley. I don't know, but yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I know it's longer than usual. There was a lot to talk about, okay? Don't come for me. And so thank you to all the patrons for making videos like this possible, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!